Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. China has successfully launched the Shenzhou 11 manned spacecraft, in which two Chinese astronauts are operating the longest in-orbit mission of China's space exploration history. So what are the challenges the two astronauts are facing in space? Where will the mission take China's space exploration? What are China's priorities in its outer space programs? To discuss all these questions, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Yang Yuguang from the China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation and Anna Tangen, author and columnist. We shall also cross over to Dumitru Dorin, a prenarial in Bucharest, Romania's first and only cosmonaut. But before we get started, let's look at this.
The Shenzhou 11 spacecraft atop a Long March carrier rocket is now lifting off from the
The rocket blasted off at 7:30 in the morning on Monday. After nearly 10 minutes of flying, the space capsule successfully entered its designated orbit 393 kilometers above Earth.
根据北京航天指挥控制中心报告
According to the Aerospace Control Center in Beijing, the rocket is flying as planned. The Shenzhou 11 has entered orbit. The solar panels have unfolded as normal. The astronauts are well. Now I declare the launch of the Shenzhou 11 manned spacecraft a success.
A see-off ceremony was held at the astronauts' training facilities hours before the launch. Fan Changlong, vice chairman of China's Central Military Commission, attended the ceremony and extended good wishes to the two astronauts.
I believe you will accomplish the glorious and tough task. We wish you success and look forward to your triumphant return.
圆满完成神舟11号飞行任务，请首长放心，请祖国和人民放心。航天员景海鹏，航天员陈东。
2 days later, Shenzhou 11 will dock with the operating space lab Tiangong 2, where the astronauts will carry out a series of medical and scientific experiments. Tiangong 2 is now in its operational orbit, awaiting the arrival of Shenzhou 11. The mission's main objective this time is testing the rendezvous and docking technologies for the country's planned space station, verifying the life support capability of the spacecraft and the space lab, conducting scientific research, and testing of engineering experiment. Tambo CCTV, Geopolitical Satellite Launch Center.
Just out of strong curiosity, how could the two astronauts survive? 33 days in the outer space. They have their human needs. They must be very lonely, right?
Actually speaking, they are not very lonely because they are colleagues. You see that during the interview with the media the day before last, they call each other brothers. So they are not lonely in space because they have a very close relationship with each other and will cooperate very closely with each other. And also the 33 days, they must be very busy because this time we have so many experiments on board Tiangong 2 and Shenzhou 11. So their life in space will be very, very busy because of the experiments, but also they will be I believe they will be very happy because in all these days, because it is long enough and they will have enough time for them to enjoy the life in space.
In Chinese, 子非鱼焉知鱼之乐. So
Absolutely.
You are not an astronaut. How could you know the happiness or not of the astronauts? What's your take about the boring life of the astronauts?
Well, actually, it's not boring in the sense that they are going to be extremely busy. I mean, if you look at past flights into space by other organizations and countries, they're on all the time. All of these experiments, every single minute of the day is planned, even down to the rest and eating things. It's very, very important. But this is going to be a real challenge to see exactly how China's space program is able to deal with this extended stay in space. The record for this is 14 months that is held by a Russian cosmonaut. And it's very damaging to your bones. There are all sorts of other issues. You're not getting natural sunlight, so you have to take B2 vitamins. You have to figure out some way of exercising to keep your bone mass up and things like this.
Let me cross over to Dr. Dorin for his comments. He's truly a professional who was sent into the orbit many, many years ago. Hello, Dorin.
Hello.
Your colleague, your friend Yang Yuguang said the state-of-the-art technologies will keep the two astronauts busy, but I wonder if there's anything to entertain these two guys so that their life would not be boring.
Please repeat the question.
My question is, you are a very experienced astronaut and you were sent into the orbit many, many years ago without, the present advanced technology. Today, we have the technology to keep these two guys very busy. But the problem is whether there will be something to entertain them, there's something entertaining for them to enjoy their life on board the spacecraft.
Okay, actually on board the spacecraft you have so many things to do, so much to work. You don't have too much time for entertainment. In any case, during our space flight we had some special tapes recorded by the Romanian television, and we had some shows, some music. Of course, it's nice to work having a music in your ears, but in the same time the concentration to the experiments requires much more attention to what you do during the space flight.
Back in 1981, you accomplished an 8-day space flight on board the Soyuz 40 spacecraft and Salyut 6 space station. From your experience, Dorin, what are the biggest obstacles for astronauts to live in space for a 30-day mission, and what can be done to solve the problems? It's very much like what I asked in the first question.
Yes, that's right. I accomplished an 8-day space flight. It is considered today a short space flight. Short space flights are pretty difficult because you just adapt to the weightlessness conditions and you have to return to Earth, and all the transformation in your bodies are done just very short time after the adaptation to the weightlessness. A long space flight is considered now till 1 year, but always 30 days it's a long flight for the experience China has now, because you have to face a lot of difficulties in adapting the body to the weightlessness. Adapting the body to the weightlessness provoke a lot of complications in the functioning of a lot of organs, even in the metabolism. The skeleton suffers a little bit, the circulation of the blood suffers, you have different other problems with your orientation in the space. In any case, the space medicine now it's so developed that faces all these problems. And 30 days, I'm quite sure your new cosmonauts will come back very safely and very healthy after 30 days of space. But you have to learn a lot from this space flight. And of course, all humanity learns, because any space experience, it's a new contribution to the development of science.
It is indeed a joint project shared by all countries, regardless of their political systems and beliefs. Tell me, Dorin, back in the early 1980s, you guys were facing greater adversity of more uncertainty, including perhaps the threats of death. Now, in the United States, the history of outer space exploration, two tragedies occurred. Anna. One was Challenger, the other Columbia.
Well, there was also...
What inspirations could we draw from the sacrifice of the American disasters?
Please repeat a little bit slowly. Please repeat a little bit slowly, because the sound, it's... yeah.
Okay. The American experience was fraught with sacrifices that were made by individuals as they attempted to reach into space. This was something that I think everybody in the world looked on and felt, a tinge of sadness that these brave people who were going into a new frontier had lost their lives. So I think it is very difficult. I mean, China's astronauts, they have to come. They come from the military, from the Air Force. They have to 800 hours of flying. They're 30 years old. They have to have advanced degrees, and then they go through a very rigorous 4-year, 10-month training program, 10 of it being mission specific. So this is very similar to everyone else. But what's interesting is that you have, I think, a new record. I think you'll have the oldest cosmonaut in outer space, because I believe that this mission commander will be celebrating his birthday, his 50th birthday, while he's out there. And the other one at 36 is perhaps a little bit older. I mean, the average age for most cosmonauts, astronauts, is 34.
Dorian,
you know, the age, yes.
Dorian, what were said to you before you were sent into the orbit in 1981 to prepare you for the uncertainty?
Actually, you spoke about age in space. The age is not so important. The experience and the health of the astronauts is very important. I know the commander of the Shenzhou 11 will have his anniversary in a few days in outer space. He will be 50 years. But he's very experienced. He's at the 3rd space flight. Also, when I was trained for my space flight, I was trained for 3 years. Of course, I was one of the youngest one in space. I was trained starting with the age of 25, and I flew when I was 28. Some of the American astronauts are sent into space when they have quite an experience, a scientific experience, usually over 40, 45 sometimes. Don't forget that John Glenn flew when he was 77 years old. So this is not a problem. But the preparation for the spaceflight, the training, the graduation of a higher institute, a doctoral work, it's quite necessary now to accomplish very complex scientific experiments.
Dorian, a very simple question about something very human. How was it exactly like when the satellite blasted off? Personally, how was it like for you?
You know, I accomplished only one space flight. One day before my space flight, I had very high emotions. Not during the space flight itself, but one day before, because I had time to think about what will happen with me, how the rocket will go up. I had time to think about the accidents happened before, because there were a lot of accidents, because nothing is accomplished so easy, especially in the space field. During the start itself, in the very beginning, I was very aware of the fact that it will be a historical moment. But at the same time, I thought that I'm in the simulator. I'm like during my training, during my hundreds and hundreds of hours of training. And I feel that I'm a real space flight only when I was pushed by the rocket up. Of course, the launch takes not so many minutes, about 9 minutes. In 9 minutes, you reach a speed of 8 kilometers per second. It means about 28,000 kilometers per hour. At this speed, you reach this speed with a high acceleration. All your body is pushed down. You feel these G's very hard on your body. It's like another 4 persons just push you from above. But you are very well trained. You were trained. I was trained in a centrifuge. I was trained in many other difficult conditions, and I faced this space flight.
And do you think your lifespan,
Dorian,
do you think your lifespan will be undermined and affected negatively as a result of such a huge impact?
Yes, that's right. My time in the space was affected by the weightlessness and by the period of launch and landing. But during the space flight, in the very beginning, I was very confused, because not having up and down, you are used on Earth to have an up and a down. Up there you don't have it. You are a little bit confused, a little bit dizzy, but at the same time very happy that you are up there in the outer space. At the same time you have a feeling that your blood comes up to the head, and for a few days you have pretty high difficulties to face the head age, this pressure up, and at the same time you feel cold at the legs, because the blood comes up and doesn't hit anymore your legs. At the same time, you don't have to move very fast in the beginning, because you are disoriented. If you move very fast, you could have sickness.
Thank you very much, Dorian. We'll get back to you in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Okay.
A question for Yu Guang. China successfully launched the first spacecraft of the Shenzhou series in 1999. From then on, China's space program has been gaining momentum year upon year. What's the most significant breakthrough of Shenzhou 11 compared to the previous ones? What lessons were learned?
Well, you see, after Shenzhou 10 mission, we've already established the standard crew transportation system for China Aerospace. That means the status, the technical specification of all these Shenzhou spaceship will not change much in the future. So this time, the most highlight of this mission is not on the Shenzhou spaceship itself. Although we do have some advanced improvements of this spaceship, but the point is on the mission itself. We will last in space for 33 days. So that's the greatest challenge for us to meet, because in the future, for China's space station, the Shenzhou spaceship need to dock with the station and stay there for half a year. And for so long period, we must keep the ship okay. This is very critical for the saving the lives during the re-entry of the Shenzhou spaceship to keep the astronauts back home. So the Shenzhou spaceship must test these kind of technologies to ensure the safety. And of course, because this time we only have 2 astronauts, we have more chances to have more scientific research payloads. These are so very meaningful.
Thank you very much. You're watching Dialogue with Yang Yuguang and Anna Tangen. We'll be also talking to Dr. Dorin from Romania. He is a very old and experienced astronaut who was sent into the orbit in 1981. We're discussing the impact that the successful launch of Shenzhou 11 could deliver to the rest of the world. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. Yuguang, in June, China signed an agreement with the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs to open the station to experiments and astronauts from UN member states, especially developing countries that find space exploration too expensive at the moment. How do you see this agreement working in practice?
I think it is a very natural choice for China. You know that I attended the International Astronautical Congress in Guadalajara, Mexico last month. And the title of this Congress is to make space accessible and affordable to all countries, including the countries from the third world. So China in the future not only express its wish to cooperate with other countries, especially to cooperate with countries from the third world. So that is a very meaningful and very important choice for China to, in the future, to cooperate with these countries and also bring more chance to the whole world and benefit the whole world.
Are you saying that most of the netizens and the users of mobile phones will benefit somehow from the use of our spacecraft development? Let me cross over to Dorin. The same question. Dorin, China signed this agreement with the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs to open the station to experiments. Now, what does that mean to you, Dorin?
Actually, I used to be the chairman of the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space from 2010 to 2011. And I worked within the United Nations for many, many years as the representative of Romania or as the representative of the Association of Space Explorers. I have a very fruitful cooperation and very serious cooperation with China. Always China came with very constructive proposals to frame the work of the office and also to promote the work of the committee. This new agreement signed this year by China helps the development of the international cooperation using peaceful purposes of the spaceflight. China signed this agreement to help developing countries to accomplish their own dreams, to have experiments into outer space, and who knows, maybe in the future to have their own cosmonauts. China also proposes to find the necessary funding for accomplishing this agreement. We salute this agreement in the framework of the UN, and we are very grateful that this agreement fulfills the purposes of the work within this committee. Everything
Dorin,
to be in the peaceful uses.
To what degree do you think the outer space has been weaponized? Are we militarizing the outer space from your perspective?
This is a very actual problem. The treaty, the Outer Space Treaty from 1967 says the space is for use in peaceful purposes. Of course, any country, any developing country develops program for the national security. Of course, a lot of military people were involved from the very beginning in the space race. In the beginning, the space activities were developed with the goal of national security. Let's say national security or gathering information. But in the same time, we are very aware now that we have to develop peaceful use of the outer space. Only the cooperation in the peaceful uses could help the humanity to develop.
Thank you very much. That's indeed
All
the
other
mandate of
purposes,
mankind,
yes.
to develop the outer space peacefully and
Yes.
jointly. Thank you very much for being with us. Back to the Beijing studio here. Anna, do you think the United States and China, the two superpowers in the outer space, will be locked up in arms race or even animosity despite the end of the Cold War?
Well, I think we're experiencing a little bit of a new Cold War that's been going on. I mean, from the Chinese perspective, they see an encirclement mentality or process which is going on. It's been based on trade. It seems to be falling apart with the TPP, but it's likely to extend into space. There's always going to be concerns about it. It's not just China. There's also concerns about Russia and the nuclear programs and things like that. You know, just last week, the Russians said we're not going to cooperate anymore in the plutonium agreement that was signed between the U.S. and Russia to prevent more nuclear warheads being put together.
Is that because the Russians were accused by the U.S. government of trying to influence the process of elections there?
There are a number of reasons. I think it has a lot to do with the sanctions also. But the problem is that in this multipolar world, you're starting to see people acting in a much more paranoid fashion. They assume that there's something bad is going to happen.
Let me bring you back to the issue of the space development, space exploration. A few years ago, China was able to destroy an outdated weather satellite with its own cruise missile that immediately shocked the whole world. And we came under fire on charges that the debris as a result of the destruction of this weather satellite may be a threat to other flying vehicles in the outer space. Do you think this is true? And how do you estimate the consequences of, say, the competition?
Well, the competition is not good if it's aimed at domination, and this is one of the main issues. In terms of tracking space debris, there is literally a supercomputer working around the clock to determine where all these bits of debris are going, because if they run into a satellite or a manned station, they can cause real damage. So it's a very, very important thing. But this shows how, if we're going to go into this new frontier, we need to do it together rather than with these kind of paranoid ideas.
Yu Guang, the mission of Shenzhou 11 will bring China one step closer to the ultimate goal of the three-step human space flight program, a large permanently inhabited space station. On the other hand, the future of the International Space Station is in question and is not guaranteed to operate beyond 2024. Will that eventually make the new Chinese space station the de facto international one?
Well, you know that you have an interview with Mr. Prunario, Dr. Prunario Doring. We all attend the 27th Association Congress of the Association of Space Explorers. During that Congress, many astronauts asked me, Yang Liwei, will China name its...
Yang Liwei is the first Taikun man to be sent into
yes,
orbit.
Will China name, and he's also the deputy chief of China's manned space program. So the astronaut asked him, will China name its space station as ISS-2? Mr. Yang Liwei told them that the name is not important, but the important point is international cooperation. So China, because I and Doring take part in two International Astronautical Congress this year and the last year, and during this Congress, the staff from the China Manned Space Agency always expressed their wish to cooperate with other countries, and also, as you mentioned, the treaty, the agreement with the United Nations have already shown that this kind of cooperation has begun. So in the future, I believe that the China's future space station not only will be a national laboratory in space, but also become an international space laboratory for all countries.
But space stations are not the weaponized part. It's a question of how you shoot down satellites, competing satellites, use of satellites for intelligence gathering or other purposes which are going to create competitive pressures between these countries.
You know, I've been wondering aloud, Anna, why even at the height of the Cold War, the former Soviet Union and the United States were able to cooperate on the same space station despite the geopolitical rivalry. Do you think this is going to happen? This is going to happen between the United States and China?
Well, hopefully it happens between the United States, China, Russia, India, and any other nation that wants to come forward. The EU was part of the 16-member consortium that created the ISS to begin with. And I think China is sending very strong signals that it intends to do the same thing, that this is not trying to close it out. But as I said, you can continue to have peaceful coexistence on these space stations, which are mostly for research. But the issue is what's happening on the other side.
There is also another important factor. During the early stage, the Salute space station, the Mir space station, and also in the early flight missions of the shuttle, they do have some military purpose, purely military purpose missions. But after all these years, it has already been proved that performing the military purpose on this kind of manned space flight is not effective and not very worthy to do this.
Bloomberg says that space is now a $330 billion industry, employing perhaps 1 million people. More and more industries are relying on space-based gear, from banks and insurers to truckers and farmers. How do you think the space economy will impact on the global economy in the future?
In the future, there is already a very remarkable trend, the commercial space flight. You know that in years before, most of the space programs, space activities are led by the governments or government-related organizations. But in the future, because in those years, like US have already released some policy to support the private companies to attend this kind of activities, I believe this will be a worldwide trend for all countries to have commercial companies attending more space flights.
China actually has a commercial company that's doing this, but in terms of the future, I mean, people look at space tourism, but that's not what's going to change this world. If we have driverless cars, it's going to depend on GPS, locational systems which are run by satellites. Entire cities will be depending on this to make sure not only that people get to their work on time, but that trucks and goods and services are delivered to where they are in a much more efficient manner.
Futuristically, looking into the future, perhaps it won't be a bad idea to send people in their thousands into the outer space with the development of a new spacecraft. I'll see you next time. I could be one of them, by the way.